Record. Yay, we're recording. Okay.
Ooh.
Well, welcome everyone, and to those of you watching. We are Blossom Whole Family Therapy, and we are a group of therapists and psychologists that work with children and families, and we are very well aware of the high demand there are right now for mental health services. We have a long waiting list, and we feel limited in how many people that we can see, but also have really been feeling and hearing from the community how much services are really needed. And so we thought we would take a little time as a group to put something together that we hope would be helpful, that would maybe give you families out there some things to think about, some ways of unpacking all of what's going on, some ways of processing it, some ways of hopefully maybe even getting information. I think a lot of people are just wondering, like, is this normal? What my kids are doing this. Is that to be expected in light of what's happening? And so we're hoping to just give some good information, as well as hopefully just some assurance and some validation and some support, because that, as we are also all parents, and we have the opportunity to talk with each other a couple times every month, and that's what actually we all have been finding to be valuable. And so we thought, well, let's share some of this conversation and put it out there into the community in the hopes that other people can find some value in this. So I'm just going to kind of go around, and everybody can wave when I say their names. But we've got Paige Nelson Ansley, psychologist, works with teenagers and adults. I'm Dr. Gretchen Lewis Snyder. I see kind of the range of kids through transitioning, early childhood all the way transitioning to college. We have Kelsey Dressel, a licensed clinical social worker who has, I think, specialty in early childhood, but also sees the age range, does work with families. Dr. Carla Berkeley, who specializes in early childhood and school age kids, and then Dr. Kasha Hoyen Zimmerman, who sees adults, psychologist who sees adults. So that's our team, and thank you guys for giving up some of your evening to put this together and put this out into the community. Really, really appreciate it. So we're just going to kind of jump in, because we don't want to spend, have this be a massive video for everyone to watch. But the demand has been really high, and I think across the board, not just families and families, but also adults. I know, Kasha, that's all you see is adults, and you see a lot. We think about, probably the people watching are adults, also likely parents. But Kasha, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what themes you notice in your work with adults. What words are people using to describe what they're experiencing right now, and what are they saying?
Yeah. Well, I think there's definitely kind of a unanimous, I would say, experience for all of us, not only the clients, but I think it's important to say that, like you mentioned, that we are all in it and we have the same feelings too. So I think the themes that come up the most is uncertainty, lots of anxiety about the unknown, themes of loss, lack of anchoring of any sort, and maybe lack of stability or hope, in a sense that I think we all kind of yearn for some level of grounding and attaching to something that is predictable. And we have very little that is predictable right now. So this ongoing transition and change is something that comes up over and over again.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's a theme in our own consultation that we all talk about as individuals and also as therapists. And it's like the ground under us is constantly shifting.
Right.
So then it's hard to be stable.
And I think it's for all of us, patients, therapists. It is really difficult to navigate the boundaries, and having a sense of what's right and what's wrong. It becomes very individual. I think for those with younger kids especially, navigating boundaries, and worries about social development, and in the sense of play dates and all of that, becomes really, really hard. And so I think that's something that comes up a lot too, in terms of what's right, what's a risk versus, which way do I go? More restricted in terms of conservative sense of I shouldn't be doing this versus, well, maybe that's permissible. And I think those parameters are different for all of us.
One of the things that I noticed too, because of that unpredictability, is that parents, we're such barometers for our children in this kind of COVID storm. And when we ourselves feel that way, uncertain, inconsistent, not really sure what to do next, what will happen next, right? That uncertainty. I think that it really causes our children to feel anxious as well. And so the need for us to be kind of anchors and stable for them, grounding for them is even more in a time where it's more difficult to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really true. And you talk about boundaries. Here we all are in our homes, right? Like that's just not typical, right? And people watching, right? This is how it is for your work. Like you've got your kids are bounding in the middle of your meeting, and just these stories, which I mean they're funny and comical because we can all kind of relate and laugh, but also it's more unstable ground.
Right.
Yeah. I mentioned many adults are also parents. We do get a lot of calls about kids, and a lot of calls from parents wondering what is normal right now with respect to child behavior. I mean, is this typical child development? Is this the situation? What is this, and how do we, and once you define it, could you please tell us how to respond to it and kind of, and parent through that. But Carla, I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that, what would we expect from kids right now, and what would be considered typical child behavior right now?
It's a great question. And I think, one thing I like to talk with my parents and families about is just when you think you know what to expect, maybe perhaps with one child or in one situation, then along comes another little personality, right? Or another situation. So I think one thing to know right now, this is no small thing. Anxiety is a very understandable and expected response. It just is right now. We are living in such uncertain times. I think that, that it's not just COVID right now. It's how we understand COVID each day, knowing what's going to happen next. That uncertainty is for everyone, right? It's not just how we explain it to kids or our families or know it ourselves. We are relying on health experts that are figuring this out as well. And right now, in close to mid-August, education experts, right? So this uncertainty is just pervading all of our lives. And I think it's worth just pausing to consider that it's not just COVID. We are living right now into layers of things that are happening. I mean, we have kind of the racial unrest and injustice that's been going on, and what we know about that, all the social connectedness. I would almost offer, it'd be interesting, I'm so excited to hear from my colleagues around this, but social connectedness, it's almost like we're upside down in where we think we should and usually are, right? For example, we kind of tell kids, don't get together, even though other times we say, let's go hang out with some friends, right? Or don't get too close. And usually we're like, let's get to go together and talk about it, right? Even that whole like, wow, watch out, people have germs. That is not what we typically would be saying to our kids.
Right, right. Well, and to go along, because I think about mixed messages, right? So the other mixed message, right? Get off your screen, go outside, go play. And now we've got online school. What are you doing? Get on your screen. Go focus on your screen. You know, like, oh my gosh, what?
Mhm.
That's right.
Well,
And
as a social component through online for
that's
teens,
right.
Yes.
you know.
Absolutely. And I know both Paige and Kasha have been talking about this, but what I would just offer is that, illness and death is all too real right now as another layer. And our customs, our traditions, our ways that we manage that. What are you guys seeing with some of the families you're working with?
Well, just kind of going back to social connectedness, a lot of my clients are teenagers and are used to spending their entire summer surrounded by their friends, very rarely even coming home to touch base with parents. And now they are stuck in home for the majority of the time. And they are feeling very lonely and very disconnected. And with sleep patterns, speaking to some of the kind of what to expect versus what to not expect. With COVID, there's not a lot of reasons to be getting up during the day because there's not any activities to be planned for. There are no social interactions that are planned. And so a lot of my teens are sleeping a lot later than would be typically expected. But we also know that teens tend to sleep more than their younger peers and than their adults. And so parents have been really coming to me and talking about anxiety around depression and what to expect from their teens, especially as they're seeing a lot more isolation, a lot more sleeping, and a lot more social disconnection because the screens can only hold them over for so long. And we're going on 6 months of having to connect over the screens.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking about disappointment, which I think is just in some ways connected to everything we're talking about. But, I imagine for young people, this sort of constant, promises of certain things, and then the changes or withdrawal of these promises just because things change. And I think parents dealing with disappointment and this uncertainty and teaching, them or helping them hold the disappointment, I think is just extremely difficult, even just in the light of having hope. And I think for some, it does come up in depression and sense of futility.
Yeah.
I think especially around the time of graduation, it was very hard for parents to not be able to experience that with their kids who have been waiting to graduate for 12 years, but then also for our seniors who missed out on their graduation that they had anticipated probably their entire student lives, along with prom and graduation parties and orientation into colleges.
Yeah.
I would say for the younger kiddos, so I'm going to kind of bring us back to maybe a different age group, but I think about just behaviors. It's going to be natural to see dysregulation would be something that we would say, like dysregulation in their emotion and behaviors. And a lot of that can also then stem from parents too. So parents who might have extra stress. We've talked about kind of working from home and those boundaries, or maybe even the families that are essential workers. So they are working out of the home now that we are kind of dialing back up. Just the integration back into kind of real life, kind of. We were all stuck in isolation for such a long time. So behaviors and emotions, I just think that's natural, and kind of what we were talking about originally was like, how do we name that, or how do we label some of those emotions? Is it grief? Is it loss? Is it disappointment? And then how do we do that for our kids and model it, but also shield them? So not over making things too big for them to handle, because we have to do it developmentally appropriate for their age and where they're at developmentally. So seeing emotions, behaviors, and that dysregulation, and then how do we work with kids to help them regulate those emotions and behaviors.
And just
No,
to throw in there, you know, like there are these extremes, but then there's also some kids that are actually doing quite well right now. They kind of are really digging the slower pace of life. They're liking the fact that they don't have to leave home a lot. They I think, you know, they like the amount that they're getting together with their friends. It might not be a lot, but they lean towards maybe more introverted, self-entertaining. Um, and so I'm just kind of watching to see how this transition back to school goes for some of those kids, and like, are they going to have to now like re-enter a different world again, and from this. But I think Carla, you were about to
yeah.
comment as
I
well.
think that's a great balance to talk about, though. One of the things I was going to say when Kelsey was describing it was to this idea of name it to tame it. So if we can think about the variety of emotions and feelings that come to all of us in different times, sometimes when we talk about anxiety or depression or other things like that, we think, oh, it's this thing that we have. And really, you know, I think one of the things we've all talked about a lot is this idea that we are expecting big emotions around this and feelings. And sometimes it is to the point of kind of clinical levels, so where we want to really get more active support. But oftentimes it is in response. You know, when I was mentioning that we would expect some anxiety, those naming those feelings and knowing that at times we see anxiety, just like Kelsey was saying, as behavior. You know, it's irritability, right? It's moodiness. Even for those kids that kind of like to hang out, I don't know. I like a little bit of more downtime and getting my book out, right? I think at times they get bored. There's a name. There's a feeling to name, and that boredom. Then they start looking on social media, or they get on a video, and their brains get in the kind of Zoom zone, right? Which is not what we want in terms of being able to really get them engaged. And that is what we want to really think about. And I just think that it's really, you know, managing these feelings. Feelings is not about making the feeling go away. It's about kind of managing the uncertainty and tolerating some of that as well.
Yeah.
And that those toolboxes that we've all really worked on with our patients and families and kiddos are their chance to practice some of these strategies. So it's almost like they're immunized against some of this uncertainty.
Inoculated, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's interesting too, because we all know, because we're parents, right? You get a meltdown or you get a tantrum, and it seems like it comes out of the blue, like it's some minuscule, right, trigger that sets it off. And almost always, like there's more underneath of it, right? Like there's such power, I think, in being able to just name the name it to tame it, Carla, that you were talking about, is powerful, because you start to name it and you put a label on it, and all of a sudden the box that has all of those things that have been building, right, out it starts to come. And all of a sudden you're now not talking about, you know, that Sally played with the toy for 2 more seconds. Now you're talking about, and I hate COVID, and I hate that we can't play together more, and right? And then there it all comes out, and it starts to, like, you really start to get at, and you get to name, and the child gets to name more and more. So sometimes I've been talking with some of the parents that I work with a little bit more about this, like, take advantage, like, you know, really work on taking this non-reactive stance, and instead using it as an opening to kind of get some naming out and naming done. And more often than not, parenting, you know, nothing is a guarantee in parenting. So stacking the deck, right? And hoping we get the outcome we're looking for. But more often than not, you do end up getting deeper, right? You do end up learning so much more about what the child has been carrying and probably didn't even realize they were carrying, right? Until it just started to erupt and come out.
Yeah.
To go off of that, like the name it to tame it, like I've been using the mantra less is more, so less words when you're in those situations, because as adults we want to talk through or process it on a different level than a kid. And so if we can kind of quiet our own voice in some of those, if it's a tantrum or emotional kind of moment, if you're able to kind of check your own emotions, which you're going to have emotions in that because it's your kid. But less is more has been kind of my mantra just for lots of different things, but specifically in those kind of bigger moments, right? If we can kind of quiet our own voice and listen or be supportive and validating our own kids.
I think this is, really, these are great thoughts. And it makes me really think about those moments. And I think especially now when we are parents and we're holding all these emotions while we're also holding our emotions. And I think if parents, if maybe they can take anything from our talk here, that I think would be a really big piece. The ability to sort of be curious and kind of almost like an investigator sort of, and not take those behaviors at times as at face value, but more so to be open to think, what if there's something else they're feeling? What if it's not necessarily about them acting out or being, difficult on top of everything else that I'm experiencing in a sense? But what if this is their cry for help? What if this is the time when they need me the most, but this is how they express it? And I think sometimes, even we started this conversation talking about how valuable it is for us to talk few times a month. And so I think we all need to be heard and validated, and sometimes naming or even just being curious rather than reactive, of course, is huge.
Is huge. And because oftentimes we're problem solvers, right? Like, let's just fix the problem and move on, fix the problem, move on, fix the problem. Right. And we're living in an era, there's nothing going to get fixed. Eddie, like, the uncertainty isn't going away. It's not going to be fixed. And so I think for those of you that are watching that would self-identify as problem solvers and who get driven crazy by the fact that you cannot solve these problems, I hope that you take away some of that. There truly is value, like true legitimate value in being able to offer just some validation and outlet of expression. Like that is what we can do right now, and it is valuable, it is meaningful. But it's hard to sit with it because it doesn't feel tangible. You don't walk away being able to really see what you've done and accomplished. And so
yes.
Well, I think resilience for us is a theme that a lot of us use in our work, and I'm kind of interested to hear from you guys. What do you notice about how people are? Because one of the I guess silver linings, if there are any, is that these kinds of situations can generate creativity, right? So what are you guys? What are you coming across? Whether it's in your clinical work or wherever it is, like how are people finding ways of being resilient and finding ways of drawing strength from different points in their life? What do you guys hear? What do you find?
I think a lot of people are spending a lot more time outdoors. So if it is like walking or biking or finding a new trail, hiking, doing kind of short kind of day trips too. So if it's to Taylor Falls or other areas within Minnesota, that camping, that kind of allows them to get outside and connect with nature. And I think we all know that can be really good for just mental health, but also your physical health too, as you're moving and being active. So a lot more people are being active that I'm working with. And also just personally too, kind of supporting one another in some of that.
I've had a number of families kind of talk about how life has always been just so busy. All of the kids have 15 different activities they have going on, and problems just kind of get swept under the rug because they just don't have time to talk about it or really deal with it. And COVID, among other things, has given us plenty of time to spend with family. And a lot of people have really used this opportunity to work on their relationships and communications patterns with one another and spend some quality time together, which I've been incredibly impressed with.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've been hearing is pets. Lots of people
Oh.
getting pets. Actually, me including. We got but I have to say that this was such a I don't know, kind of an uplifting experience, you know, to be able to focus on something else, the joy that comes with it, and certainly working through telehealth. I have met lots of pets, new ones and old ones, and I think that's really meaningful for people.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would maybe just wrap up by saying that, man, let kids guide you. Kids are magical about being in the moment.
Mhm.
So, you know, I love all of these things that we as adults have accomplished. Oh my, I can be in my bedroom now, not having to, right? You cleaning things out, really spending time together. It's been great. But I do feel like kids are just, all you have to do is be present with them. I think we've spoken to that several times throughout our conversation tonight, but they will engage you with anything, right? Whether you're outside and you are looking at the pattern on leaves in different trees, or you know, deciding and debating on a card game, whatever it is. I think that's allowing ourselves to be with one another is one of the best ways that we can balance some of this, our own uncertainty and anxiety in this time. I think just the being present and being able to really be that for each other is one of the best ways to kind of counter that, and then build these wonderful relationships as a byproduct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got such a wonderful panel of experts to be able to talk about these things. And again, I really thank you guys for being willing to do this. And hopefully the people listening have really been able to draw value. I mean, I think the bottom line is, like, we're all figuring this out, all of us, like every single one of us. That's super unusual. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of other times that the therapists are simultaneously experiencing the same things that their clients are, and even parents simultaneously experiencing the same things that their kids are. I mean, we're all, this is so unusual for so many reasons, the layers of it. It's just really it's pretty extraordinary what we're doing, and yet people are finding ways of drawing strength. People are finding ways of figuring it out and managing it and learning to deal with the uncertainty of it. Our hope is that as you were listening, maybe you got some of your own emotions identified and recognized and validated. I hope that you got to hear that you are not alone, even though you may not have been able to have these conversations directly with people. Although, if you can, I would encourage you to, because that is a source of strength. That is a source of something that is helpful long term. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to post this, of course, and then we're also going to have some surveys available, because we are interested in how to broaden what we have to offer to more people, if that's possible. But part of that is understanding what would people actually find helpful. So, we did this in the hopes that it would be helpful. We would love to have some feedback on that, as well as what else might be helpful. And then also, as we were talking about doing this, we've all been discovering some additional resources that are about to be posted on our website as of the recording of this. They're not all up there, but they would include, there's information from the Child Mind Institute that can go into some more specific information. So if you have very specific questions about your kids, the articles are fairly easy to read. They're straightforward. It's good information. There's the Gottman Institute also has put out some pretty interesting things about, just most recently, about ambiguous loss, and I'm going to post that link because I do think dealing with ambiguous loss, that's what this is, right? It's so much uncertainty. There's so many layers to it, and so I'll post that on our website as well, so that you all have access to that and can explore that if you think that would be helpful. If anybody has any last comments, feel free to chime in. And
I just want to acknowledge, as we were talking about therapists and going through these things, I just think about teachers. I mean, this mid-August, teachers with their own children, teachers preparing for work with kids, and and many parents thinking about their own children going back to school and how that's all going to work. So that might be another topic that we have some resources up, but that we could consider as well.
Yeah, I do. I feel for teachers. I think that's probably one of the most challenging jobs right now. I mean, holy moly. Wow. Because you're not, well, yes. Yes, let's just leave it there. Yeah. Well, thank you guys all again.